Hey, so we're here in scenic Kenilworth, New Jersey. We're at the headquarters of Maingear Computers. I got a couple of knuckleheads with me, and we've got a whole lot of gear here in the car. And I believe the objective here today is to build an awesome killer gaming rig with the good folks at Maingear. Say hi, Ron.
What's up? I'm excited to have you guys here.
That's Ron Reed,
awesome.
And there's Marco Chiappetta. I'm Dave Altavilla.
What's up, everybody?
And this is going to be fun. Hey everybody, Dave Altavilla for Hot Hardware here with my compatriot, this guy.
Marco Chiappetta.
Marco Chiappetta, also for Hot Hardware, go figure. And we are here in Kenilworth, New Jersey, if you've ever heard of that place. But if you haven't...
It's gorgeous, right?
It's gorgeous, yes. And at least for our purposes today, it's gorgeous. And we're here in Kenilworth, New Jersey at the headquarters of Maingear Computers with this guy. And his name is Ron Reed. He is the marketing director for Maingear. And he was so nice to let us come down here today to build, hopefully, a killer gaming rig and production content creation rig for our use at hothardware.com. Ron, thanks for having us today.
I'm like super excited about this. This is going to be really cool. Kind of like a behind the scenes look in the way that we build our own vibes for our customers, which I think is going to be awesome.
Cool, yeah. So yeah, Ron said the Vibe, the Maingear Vibe, which is the chassis in this box, along with some pretty cool liquid cooling and some components from some manufacturers that were good enough to help us out, right, Marco?
Yeah, so in addition to Maingear hooking us up with some really cool stuff, we got some hardware from Gigabyte, an awesome NVMe PCIe 4 SSD, an X570 motherboard. EVGA hooked us up with an awesome 1,000-watt power supply, and of course, we can't forget AMD with the killer 12-core Ryzen 9 3900X. And the Radeon RX 5700 XT, so the current top-of-the-line Navi on tap here as well.
Beautiful. All the makings for a great production, content creation, and gaming machine built here in the United States of America, Kenilworth, New Jersey, at Maingear Computers. In the Vibe, coming up next.
Okay, before we get rolling on the build, I want to show you some of the really cool hardware that we have going into the rig. Let's start on this side. We'll start with the smallest box first. This is the Gigabyte Aorus NVMe Gen 4 SSD. So this little bad boy is awesome. It is a standard M.2 2280 SSD with this awesome copper heatsink, capable of nearly 5 gigabytes per second sequential reads. Super awesome SSD there. And that is going to get installed into the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Master motherboard. So we showed some of this stuff off in our launch article. This guy's got nice beefy cooling on the VRMs, plenty of overclocking and gaming related features, plus cooling, on the heatsink on all of the M.2 slots. Though these guys are going to come off to accommodate the heatsink on the Aorus SSD. We've also got an awesome Kingston HyperX Predator RGB memory kit going in. It's all going to be powered by this beefy 1,000 watt EVGA power supply. Don't think it's going to look too sexy in the box, but yep, it's in there. Nice. And of course, we have to show off some of the AMD gear. Now, at the heart of the system is going to be the Ryzen 9 3900X 12-core processor. Now that guy just fits right into the AM4 socket, just like previous gen. Underneath here is a Wraith Prism cooler. That is not going to get used. Maingear's hooking us up with some awesome liquid cooling. And pushing the pixels, we have this guy, the Radeon RX 5700 XT, the current high-end Navi-based GPU.
Sounds like all the gear we need for a great machine.
Definitely.
All right, so in terms of chassis and cooling, we got some special stuff here from Maingear, but I am definitely not the expert on this. This guy over here is Ron Reed's going to tell us a little bit about the Maingear Vibe chassis that we're going to be working with.
Yeah, so let me talk a bit about what kind of the Vibe is to Maingear, right? So, traditionally we've sold our systems as customizable PCs. So we have custom chassis, and you can go on our website, and there's a bunch of different components you can select, and then we hand build the PC for you. With the Vibe, we wanted to take a different approach, and we really created like a full ecosystem for the community. So the idea is you can buy the Vibe from us as a custom PC. The traditional way that you always could with Maingear, we have what we call enthusiast pre-configured PCs, and those are basically performance optimized configurations where it's for your specific use case, and it's very easy to purchase. But we have a history of being DIY guys, right? That's how almost every person in Maingear got started.
That's us, yep.
And so with the Vibe, we wanted to kind of celebrate that community by releasing a full selection of parts that you can do and build a Vibe your own way yourself. People have asked for years, and we finally have it available on our website and through Micro Center. So I'll talk a little bit more now in depth about the chassis itself. So with the Vibe, we took everything that we learned with our F131 that we released 2 years ago and wanted to bring it to a more affordable platform. So from the start, it's a mid-sized ATX chassis, so it supports an eATX motherboard. You'll notice immediately when you look at it that it's just a really premium build quality for the price. So excellent construction, really good materials. We've focused on ease of building inside, so you're going to notice that cable management is really simple, and there's just ample room regardless of what kind of build you want to put inside of it. We built it with liquid cooling in mind, so it supports a 360 millimeter radiator in the front and a 240 on the top. It's got a really nice tinted tempered glass side panel that's super clean. As far as other stuff on the inside, it's got an illuminated RGB front logo, so you can control the color. It has USB Type-C on the side, really, really good I/O in its class. And you'll notice it's actually on the side of the PC, which I love because you're gonna wanna show this build off on your desk, and so it's in the perfect spot to make it accessible. One of the other fantastic features of the case is we designed a custom fan and RGB controller that comes with the chassis. So essentially it's got a PWM controller, so you can plug all your fans in and easily manage the speed, but it's got some secret sauce. So it's the custom RGB controller. You can connect all of your RGB fans and all of your RGB lights to the actual controller itself. But what's nice is if you have a motherboard that supports software RGB, you run a single cable to the motherboard, and then you're able to control all the lights via software. But if you don't have a motherboard that supports that, you flip a switch on the controller and it essentially switches to a remote control, which is cool because it gives flexibility regardless of how you're building your machine. But it's not just about the chassis itself. So like the F131, we announced our Apex cooling solution, and we brought it down to the Vibe in a more affordable fashion. So Apex is a fully integrated liquid cooling solution that kind of takes a lot of the secret sauce and what we've learned about liquid cooling over the years and puts it into a single product for your build. So the idea with Apex is that it's an oversized reservoir, so you don't have to worry about constantly topping off your build. It's a distribution block. And so what that means is it's routing the coolant through the system, so you get much cleaner liquid cooling and really clean lines to the build. And then it also has an integrated pump on the inside, so you're getting a lot through this. And like I said at the beginning, I think what's really amazing is this is now the first time ever for Maingear that this is available for the DIY audience. We partnered with Micro Center, so you can go into a store today and pick up an Apex block or a Vibe chassis and do a build yourself. And it just gives you all the room to customize it, to the way that you want it, including the fact that we even have 4 different colors for the Vibe: black, white, red, and a nice gray. So you really can build the system of your dreams like Maingear does. And I'm really excited that you guys are going to be building in this today.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
All right, now, but before we get into the build, we got to take a quick tour of Maingear's facility because it's been, maybe 7, 8, 9 years since we were here last?
I don't think that long, but it's been a couple of years for sure.
Yeah, it's been a while, and Wallace is going to show us around his house.
Hey, welcome to the Nerdery once again. A couple of things changed this time around, and we're gonna take you for a quick tour. Let's go. Process is still pretty much basically the same, but better. It's one man, one machine, and here essentially we assign a system or an order to a builder, and the builder will build it from beginning to end. Okay. Once that system is built, take it right here. We line it up in the inspection station here where system needs to be inspected by a second technician, okay? And once that system is inspected visually, that's when it goes to our testing station, okay? So here we have Nicole. She's running the tests on all the systems. I believe last time we had like 10 monitors assigned per rack. Now we have a KVM switch with the 10 monitors being shown at the same time here. So it's better visually for her, so she can be able to see, catch any artifacts, anything that might happen during the testing. As you know, benchmarking is not just getting that final number, but also ensuring that you're getting a visual representation of how the system's gonna perform at the customer's house. So in this case here, we have the systems line up, and they're just going through a battery of tests, right? A lot of these tests are, custom batch files that we've created in-house, and combining different benchmarks like 3D Mark, Heaven, etc., Prime, and we're basically trying to stress test the system here to make sure that we catch any issues at the factory before it ships out.
Nicole also does the Netflix and beers after hours, right?
Yeah.
On that nice big panel, baby.
Cool. So once the systems are built, they get carted over to the shipping station here. Dan ran away from the camera. I don't know where he's at right now. Camera shot.
Dan can't hide, man.
Yeah, so we have two guys here, Dan and Igor, and they're doing the final preparation in the computers. We're basically, basic things, like we're waxing the computer if there's any types of paint jobs. We're making sure that there's no types of fingerprints or anything like that, and we're finishing the packaging process. Now, once we package the computer up, we spray a little bit of a new car scent. So we want that that experience to be cool. So we take the out-of-box experience very seriously here, and everything from the way the box looks like to the way it smells when you open it, right? To the tchotchkes that we include in there, the little extras, bracelets, things like that. It just makes you more part of the brand and makes it feel like we're building it. It's being built by people right here in New Jersey. I'm sorry, in this case, assembled by people right here in New Jersey, and assembled with a lot of love. So that's the idea.
Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Cool.
So we're about ready to dive into the build, and as much as I would love to rip open all these boxes and do it all myself, because building PCs is my favorite thing in the world, we're here with Brent, the community manager from Maingear. He's going to help us with this build. Brent, why don't you talk about what's going to happen here?
So we're going to build in the Maingear, in the Vibe case here, the way that Maingear normally does it. Now this case is very flexible, and you can build it in any way you like, but I wanted to show you the special way that we've learned to build this over the years.
So we're going to get started with the build. I am not going to pretend to be as good as the guys at Maingear. As much as I love building PCs, these guys are the experts, but I can handle some of the simple stuff, and then we'll hand things off to Brent. I'm just going to pop the CPU, memory, and SSD into the Gigabyte motherboard that we have here. So start with the CPU, super easy. Just going to open up the zip socket and line up the tab on the CPU with the little triangle on the socket. It should just drop right in. That guy is all set. Now I took the liberty of removing this shield on this M.2 slot and put in the proper mount for a 2280 SSD. This guy is literally just going to plug right in here. And I have one screw to install. Let's see if I can do this quickly on camera, or maybe I should do it later with these big gorilla hands. Nope, we got it. We're okay.
You're 2 for 2 so far.
That's right, we're rocking so far. The memory goes in slots A2 and B2 first on this motherboard. So we are going to just pop that right in. This is the Kingston RGB HyperX RAM. That's one.
And typically they're in the farther slots, but you want to consult your motherboard manual because it might be different for your specific motherboard.
Yeah, absolutely. We were lucky enough to actually have it printed right on the board here, so
Yeah,
nice
there
and
you go.
easy. Now, this guy is basically prepped. Makes it super easy with the M.2 SSDs for the water cooling block that's going to go in, but there's some prep that has to happen there. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we have the static protection going. It's the first time I think I've worn one in 30 years, but we're doing it right here with Maingear. All right, Brent, so what are you going to do next?
So we're going to install the water block. So I'm going to use the power screwdriver here. And when you're using a power screwdriver, you want it on the lowest setting so it's similar to hand torque. And so we're going to just pull off the default bracket that comes on the AM4 socket and install our water block here.
Don't break it, Brent.
I won't. So this particular water block by AlphaCool actually uses the back plate that comes with the motherboard. So we can just keep that on there. And then so leave that there, and then we have a couple screws to install here. Because of its universal mounting, so you can get the same water block no matter what chipset you're using or what processor you're using. So
We're going to leave that plastic on there, right?
yeah, take that off first. So we're going to prep the screws here,
Kind of an insulator.
and maybe you can help me with this. So washer, then spring, then washer, then nut.
So washer, spring, washer, nut.
Yep.
You better wash something, Marco.
Yeah, that's what my wife says.
Okay, so we're going to take off our plastic guard there and then apply a thermal paste. There's multiple different ways to do this. I like the 2 grains of rice. For a Ryzen processor like this, that's plenty. Threadripper is a little bit bigger of a chip. You might need quite a bit more. And then we want our flow to be correct. So this is our intake and our outtake for our water cooling tubes. And then I'm just going to hand tighten this down into the socket.
And then the springs, basically, once you crank the screws down, are going to apply enough contact pressure to keep
Yeah.
that guy cool, right?
Yeah, you don't want to apply too much or you'll start bending the PCB under the chip, but just to where it's snug.
So that is a custom milled water block. And what's it made out of? Acrylic?
So this would be, the top would be acrylic, the bracket's steel, and then
Copper
the
base.
actual would be nickel plated.
Nickel-plated.
Nickel-plated copper. So it has that silver look, which on this build, raw copper might have actually looked nicer. But
We have all the precious metals going on.
And did we have good clearance with the SSD that fit in there?
Yeah.
I think we're good. Cool.
so it's a little bit tight, but it'll make it good. So you can feel that it's hand tight. It's not going to go down anymore.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And then I kind of like to just look at the board and make sure we're not bowing it and it looks pretty straight. So I think we are ready to put it in the case now. Okay, so take off our glass side panel. Place this down here where it's not going to get knocked over. And then I usually like to just take all of the panels that we can off of the case so you have one open room. And we're going to lay the chassis down so that while we're screwing our motherboard in, it doesn't fall out. Now, this motherboard we got lucky and they already installed or pre-installed I/O shield, so we don't have to forget about that. I think everybody's first build, you've forgotten the I/O shield and you have to rebuild the whole thing all over again. Center screw in the Vibe is raised a little bit on the edges, so you can use that to mount the motherboard in the right place, and it'll kind of hold all the other parts in there. And then our screws are in our hard drive bay.
Just a quick interlude to show you where we are with the build. So the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Master is mounted in the case right now. CPU and water block installed, memories installed, SSDs installed, all the screws holding the motherboard are in place. So I think at this point we're going to put in the power supply. This is the EVGA Supernova 1000 G3 fully modular PSU. What's great about a fully modular power supply is you only use the cables that you need, so less clutter inside the chassis. We're going to need the ATX power connector. We have a couple of EPS 12-volt connectors, I should say cables, a couple of PCI Express graphics card power cables, and we're going to add a SATA power cable because when Dave gets this guy back in the lab, he's probably going to add some big storage with all those video files he's going to be working with.
So with a modular PSU, I like to plug the cables in the power supply before you put it in there, just because it's harder to reach. And so just undo your cable here. And then this is the 24-pin side, so that's going to go to the motherboard. And then you just line it up with the designation on the power supply. And they'll just snap in. Just going to do that 6 more times. Different cables. Okay, so I've got all my cables plugged in. In the Vibe, the ventilation is on the bottom, so you want to make sure the fan goes facing downward. We'll just slide it in here. And then it's just a simple applying the screws. So I hold it up against it while we get the first one in. Just until the screwdriver says it's tight enough. Pretty simple, just 4 screws, piece of cake.
I don't mean to screw you up, but down here is a filter too, right? Does it just slide out?
Yeah. So over time, you can just pull the filter out the back, clean that out, and get fresh intake to your power supply.
Cool.
Pull the dog hair out.
Yep. So now the favorite part of everybody's build, cable management. Which at Maingear, we pride ourselves at being very detailed in cable management, but it doesn't make it any less of a pain in the butt. So we're going to start with our 24 pin here, which we'll bring through this top grommet, and then just rotate our table so I can show you the front.
Sorry.
Losing screws everywhere. And that just goes into the motherboard. That'll power the whole motherboard. And pull that back, clean it up. And then I'm going to grab our EPS connectors, which this motherboard requires 2 of them.
Just actually a quick mention, you can get by with just one on this motherboard, but if you want to enable the Precision Boost Overdrive and make sure you're getting max power to the board for overclocking, best to have both of those installed.
Yeah, especially with this Ryzen 9, right?
Yeah.
You're going to want all that power. So with these ones, they're kind of tricky because it's so close to the edge of the case. So I like to kind of pull them through more than you need to. And then they kind of combine into one connector. And you can install both halves at a time if that's easier, which is what I'm going to do.
All right, another quick progress update with the build. So far we have a bunch of cables in and a bunch of hardware mounted. So front panel audio, the RGB lighting control plugged in here, a couple of USB 3 headers, front panel switches, and the LED right over here. We have the USB-C front panel connected as well. This is going out to the fan controller on the back, and of course the big ATX power. And up here, the 2 EPS 12 volts are plugged in as well.
Okay, so now we've got all the wiring done. We're going to add the first parts of our water cooling. So we've pre-mounted our fans onto our radiator block. And this 360 millimeter radiator just goes right there in the front. And then,
That is a big boy.
yeah, we're going to have plenty of cooling potential here. And just screw it onto the front of the chassis. And you may have noticed we removed the front panel of the chassis here. Just with the Vibe, there's a lot of wiring, so you want to be a little careful when pulling that off. And once I get 2 screws in, it pretty much holds itself, but we'll put the remainder of the screws in here. Okay. And then we'll grab our top radiator here, which is a 240.
So a front-facing 300 and a top 240?
Front 360,
360.
top 240.
360, 240.
And we've got really big mounting rails up here, so if we need to move this backwards or forward while we're doing our bends, we have a little bit of forgiveness there, which is always really nice. It's one of my favorite parts of this case. This case also supports obviously the 120 fan spec, but also the 140. So you could put a 280 up here too if you wanted. So we're going to install our Apex block here. which is fairly simple. We've pre-installed our mount here, which comes with the Apex block. And then you just slide it up and in. And I've loosened our radiator off the front so we can connect this fitting in the back. And then take our screwdriver.
You know it's at a Marco hands, or you're good?
I think I'll be fine this time. Two screws go in the front here. And two. And then we're just going to fix it to the top here so it doesn't move around at all. And then our distribution block is in place. We'll tighten up this radiator again, and then we're ready to do tubes and water cooling.
So that's the Apex. Is it made out of acrylic?
Yeah,
that
so
block?
this acrylic distribution block, reservoir and pump combo, which you can see the pump here. So it helps keep all the lines really clean. We'll just have two pipes coming off our CPU there, and then be able to manage all the liquid cooling between the parts there in the back.
So that distributes liquid between the two radiators, both.
Between the two radiators, and then we'll probably have one incoming from the CPU.
CPU.
And then pushing out of the CPU, and we'll have our fill port here so we can fill it very easily from our large reservoir.
Nice.
All right, time to install the GPU. We have our Radeon RX 5700 XT right here. Let's get this guy gently into the case. Okay, she is in. Time for a couple of screws and cables, and she's ready to go.
Sean's doing some quick plumbing, bending tubes and fitting them. That's the CPU feed. We're fitting in there. Measure twice, cut thrice. Is that it?
Very much so.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Brent is inserting the last of the liquid tubing from the CPU block.
Put it in, I think it might be the other way. No. No instructions on which way is which.
No manual for that, Brent.
Okay, so we're gonna need to take a little bit more off of this side, it looks like. Yeah, just because that's under stress. So we'll just shave that off a bit and then we should be good to go. Sucky part is you have to do this every time, even if your cut's wrong, or else you'll break it.
Yeah. The last of the liquid tubing yet again. This is the tricky one, but I think we get the angle now. Brent's got the angle, we should say.
Yep, that'll work.
That'll work.
So we'll put the fittings on and we'll be good to go.
So you've got a feed to the reservoir and a return back from it.
Yeah, into the radiator, into the top radiator, through the distribution block, and then into the other radiator, and then back into the reservoir.
And the moment of truth here, we're now adding the liquid coolant. We leaking yet, buddy?
Not yet. Good signs.
So this is mostly water, but also some anti-corrosive and anti-bacteria, antimicrobial.
Yeah, so like a biocide or anti-algin.
Gotcha.
Do you know how hard it is for me to hold in the funky noises as he's doing this?
Here it goes to the CPU. And then at this point we'll have to start the pump, push some of the water through, and then fill up some more. We're just topping off the reservoir here.
Really getting some milk through those tubes, baby.
Squeeze it, Brent.
This is a wholesome system.
And then Marco, I'll have you tilt the system forward just so we can really get this topped.
Don't drop it, Marco.
Hold that. And there'll be a little bit of air in the tubes, but as the pump runs, it'll force it back into the reservoir here. And then we can add the last bit of water.
All right, so here she is. System is basically done. The only thing left is to install the side panel and to install Windows on the SSD. If you take a peek all the way back there, there's that gorgeous Gigabyte X570 motherboard. And in that CPU socket behind all that nice piping, Ryzen 9 3900X 12-core CPU. You got that nice Kingston HyperX Predator memory blinging along. Can't forget the Radeon RX 5700 XT in the graphics slot. You know, and if you take a peek around everything, the beautiful Maingear Vibe chassis holds all of this stuff nicely, and that Apex cooling system, that just looks awesome, especially with the white coolant matching the case. The whole setup just vibes really well, if you ask me.
Our AMD Ryzen 9 3900X and Radeon RX 5700 XT build with Maingear, Gigabyte, and EVGA turned out to be spectacular thanks to the clean, easy-to-work-with layout of the Vibe chassis and the expert guidance we had with Maingear along the way. The system is rock-solid stable with AMD's Precision Boost Overdrive maxed out at 4.15 GHz across all 12 of the CPU cores, and it scores 7,335 on Cinebench R20. This machine should serve as a seriously powerful content creation rig with this kind of multi-threaded horsepower. And of course, on the gaming side of things, we're pulling down around 60 frames per second at 4K high image quality settings and titles like Far Cry New Dawn. So kicking back for some fast-paced leisure time will be handled with ease as well. So there you have it. It's been a long, hard-working day here in New Jersey in the hot summertime, building a great machine with the good folks at Maingear. The Maingear Vibe, which you can pick up now, do it yourself at Micro Center. The Maingear Vibe with Apex liquid cooling. Brent, thanks very much for your help today. My goodness.
Problem.
Spent lots of time working and slaving over this machine. We've got great AMD technology on board, Gigabyte, EVGA, all the good stuff. Marco, what'd you think? How'd we do today?
I think we did great, actually. And you know, you're gonna watch a few minute short video. Brent spent hours literally cutting cables and making sure everything fit well. I think it came out great.
And all we did was feed him pizza. You know, it was great stuff. But hey, thanks very much for checking this out. Check out the build a little bit more at hothardware.com, where you can find us on the web, youtube.com/hothardware. Hit thumbs up, subscribe, or you can get notified when we go streaming or we give additional event coverage or reviews, all that good stuff. And yeah, thanks very much, Maingear, and thanks everybody for stopping by.